Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about a mind that basically built the world we live in. I'm talking about everything from the computer in your pocket to the future of AI. And he did it long before most of us were even around. So let me ask you this. What if one single person wrote the operating system for our modern world? Sounds kind of crazy, right? Well, the man we're talking about today, John von Neumann, is pretty much that person. He's this invisible force behind so much of what you do every single day. I mean, seriously, from the phone you're probably holding right now to the logic that makes artificial intelligence even possible, his fingerprints are just everywhere. All right, so let's pull back the curtain and meet this ghost in the machine, John von Neumann. Okay, so to really get a grip on his impact, you have to understand the sheer scale of his brain. We're not just talking brilliant. I mean, his peers, these were giants in their own right. They thought his intelligence was, well, almost alien. Now this is a heavy one. You gotta know who said it. Eugene Wigner, a Nobel Prize winner himself. This is a guy who hung out with Albert Einstein, titans of science, and he said von Neumann was on a totally different level. Just think about that for a second. And get this, he wasn't just a math whiz. His mind was a powerhouse in pretty much everything. We're talking about a guy who could remember, word for word, pages from books he'd read years ago. At 6 years old, he's chatting in ancient Greek. And later in life, he knew so much about Byzantine history that a professor at Princeton actually deferred to his knowledge on the subject. It's just wild. And this story, it just perfectly captures it, right? His genius wasn't just about raw horsepower. It was a completely different way of seeing things. I mean, his colleague Edward Teller was blown away watching von Neumann talk to his 3-year-old son like they were equals. It just shows you how flexible and powerful his mind really was. So, okay, how does a mind like that actually build the world we live in? Let's take a look at the blueprints he left behind. Okay, this right here is probably his most famous idea, the von Neumann architecture. Here's why it's such a game changer. Before him, you had hardware for one specific task. What he did was come up with this revolutionary idea that the instructions, the software, could live in the very same memory as the data. That's why your phone can be a calculator one second and a camera the next. It's the blueprint for pretty much every single digital device you own. But see, he wasn't just trying to build a better computer. That wasn't the end game for him. No, he was chasing a much bigger question. He was trying to figure out the basic logic of life itself. He was obsessed with this really deep question. When does a machine stop being just a tool? At what point does it get complex enough that it can start to improve itself, to grow, to evolve? And thinking about that led him to one of his most, mind-bending ideas. So his answer was this theoretical machine he called the universal constructor. Just picture it, a robot floating in a sea of parts. It can build anything, sure. But here's the kicker. It can also build a perfect copy of itself. And this wasn't just some sci-fi daydream. This became a core concept for the entire field of artificial life. And this is where it gets really brilliant. This is the key that unlocks the whole idea of evolution. He realized you had to separate the builder, the hardware, from the blueprint, the software. So the machine itself is the constructor. But the instructions it follows, that's just information. A tape that can be copied, and, this is the crucial part, it can be changed, it can mutate over time. And you want to hear the craziest part? Von Neumann figured all of this out years before anyone even knew what the structure of DNA looked like. It's exactly how biology works, right? DNA is the blueprint, it's the code. It doesn't actually do the building, it just holds the instructions. The man literally reverse engineered the logic of life decades before science caught up. But this story, it takes a really tragic and deeply human turn. It shows you the fragile person behind that colossal intellect. See, for a guy whose entire identity, his whole sense of self, was wrapped up in his incredible mind, this was a fate worse than death. The cancer wasn't just attacking his body, it was attacking the very core of who he was. This story from his daughter is it's heartbreaking. He, the man who could do lightning-fast calculations in his head, was asking her to quiz him on simple arithmetic. Things like, what's 7 plus 6? He was just desperate for any sign that a piece of his old self was still there. One of his colleagues said that seeing him in his final weeks was the most suffering he had ever witnessed in a person. Just try to imagine that, to have one of the greatest minds in history, and then to feel it just slipping away, bit by bit. It's a tragedy that's almost impossible to comprehend. So, what's the takeaway from all this? What can we, students, thinkers, anyone really, learn from his life and work? You see, it wasn't just about what he knew, it was about how he thought. You could call it the von Neumann method. First, you connect ideas from totally different fields: history, biology, math, whatever. Then you apply logic, patiently, digging down to the very core of a problem. You focus on the fundamentals, asking those huge, basic questions. And finally, you just don't get scared by complexity. You tackle the biggest ideas out there, even if they seem impossible. And man, that approach is more relevant today than it has ever been. So von Neumann showed us the logical line a machine has to cross to be able to evolve. He laid that groundwork. And now, today, as we're standing right on the edge of new eras in AI and synthetic biology, his work kind of leaves us with a challenge, doesn't it? What's the next threshold we need to cross? And are we even ready for it?